Hello, everyone. Episode 45 is part 2 of the previous Manosphere episode, so make sure you've heard that one first. I'll link it in the show notes. Now here's part 2.
Make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial.
Teach me how to clean my room, so that's nice. That's good.
While smuggling in some good old-fashioned sexism, I imagine.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, this stuff is disturbing. The first time I came across this pickup artistry scene was because there was an ex-Muslim guy that I followed on Twitter who would always tweet to this really disgusting pickup artist guy and like say, "Oh, your tips are great," and just the stuff that you know how Twitter shows you when someone is responding to someone and you're not even following that person, but now you get to see their whole conversation. I don't know why Twitter does that, but I saw that he was like preaching something about how you can tell women when they're like ovulating, and that's when they're easier because their body is, I don't know, looking to reproduce. So that's the time to really hit them up. And it was just so disgusting to me that these people are going around trying to sense which women out there are ovulating so that they can have sex with them more easily.
That's almost comical by comparison to some of the things. I mean, to mention Julian Blanc again, his thing about he's got several tips about how to physically control a woman in terms of the movements around a room as well. Like if a woman just says, "Oh, I'm just going to go and talk to my friend over there," no, you pull them by the arm and you lead them here. And if she tries to leave, you because, "Oh no, it's just around the corner. My hotel room's just around the corner," and you essentially try and physically coerce a woman. This is the beginnings of rape. That's what's happening.
Yeah, that's like Cernovich. He had that blog post, "When in doubt, whip it out," saying that.
He just started like his tip was to basically just whip out your dick and start masturbating on women.
Yeah, until they give in and say, "Okay, fine," like just let this be over with. Do what you need to. And this is another that's wonderful, wonderful, respected guest of Dave Rubin's, who, I think Daily Beast tweeted out that Fox News booked Cernovich, who was a rape apologist, and they had a whole article listing examples of how he's a rape apologist. Dave Rubin tweeted, haha, like rattling cages, like as if it's just some like poking the SJWs who are way too sensitive about rape kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, Cernovich is another man who really ought to be in prison if the things he said in his tweets are true. He's a rapist.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that in my mind. Again, that's assuming anything he ever says is true. But if it were, then he's definitely a rapist. And there are various people like that who not just Dave Rubin, but it goes beyond that because I mean the thing you mentioned about just letting it happen, that actually has the legal ramification of arguments that are made in court specifically about lack of resistance.
But women who are terrified will stop resisting at some point. But you're right.
If you have like the situation where the woman fears for her life, she'll just lie there and allow the situation to play out and then wait for the person to leave. That act of resistance isn't necessary as far as I'm concerned, but in certain legal jurisdictions, it's seen as, that was consensual then.
That's so sad.
So forcing that kind of situation where it becomes normal for women to just accept that in and of itself isn't just creepy in that individual instance, but has much larger legal ramifications for people who it's not just a matter of situations where you whip your dick out, which is bad enough in of itself, but of actual full-on rape as well.
Yeah, because people have a fight or flight response, and sometimes they just freeze.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that this is also used when it's male rape victims, because they say, why can men can't be raped? They're stronger than women.
Yeah.
So it's not that simple. It's legitimately not that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the situation, people used this with Donald Trump, didn't they? They said, when he said he'd grab the pussy, he said they let them do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you know that Donald Trump is powerful and rich and
Yeah.
has the lawyers to definitely get out of any situation, basically. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
He could almost do that thing. He could almost do that thing he bragged about shooting someone dead on Fifth Avenue and get away with it because he's got the most expensive lawyers in the world. You're not going to take him down. So essentially, you just allow it to happen and try and get on with your life as best you can after. That's not saying that was consensual.
We're seeing exactly that happen right now with the Stormy Daniels situation. This porn star that he had sex with at some point, and she's come out about it and said, yes, Donald Trump did do this, and she's allegedly even being threatened.
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes right to the top, right? Talk about mainstreamizing this shit. If New York Times is writing articles that sanitize what the problem is with incels, and the president is talking about forcefully grabbing pussies, then there's a serious systemic issue here.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If the most powerful human being on the planet is a man that we know has engaged in, I'm going to happy to say this, and he can sue me if he wants to. I think he's a fucking rapist, and it seems pretty damn likely that he's been involved in all kinds of domestic abuse as well throughout his past marriages. That goes in with racism as well, because he was twice sued by the federal government for racist leasing practices in his buildings. If all of that could be wrapped up in the most powerful man in the world, your average incel is emboldened by that enormously, because this isn't just some little group on the internet anymore. This is mainstreamed bigotry.
Yeah.
Tens of millions of people voted for a man knowing all of this about him.
Yeah, it's appalling. It is so appalling to me. We are in some very strange times. But are there any other of these manosphere groups that we haven't touched? We've touched the pickup artists, the PUAs. We've touched the men going their own way. I don't want to use touched. I guess that's disgusting. We've
no one's touched them in years. Yeah,
we've discussed MGTOWs, as I was saying. We've discussed incels. There's also volcels, right?
Oh, voluntary celibates. I like, whenever I hear that, it just, I don't think I've ever heard that seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, it's essentially, there are people who are MGTOW who are essentially voluntary celibate, but I don't think anyone's ever described themselves that way.
Okay.
It's just, essentially, it's people who've just checked out of the dating game again, isn't it?
I've heard people do it ironically, but never seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the same way that people use SJW to describe themselves ironically, but no one actually is an SJW in that sense.
Yeah.
Except for some Tumblr types, but...
Well, you get some... That's the thing with the iron law of the internet, is there's always some small subset of idiots who actually do break whatever rule you have.
Yeah. But what else? There's the red pillars, right? I heard Rush V talking about this in your episode, where he was upset that the red pillars were turning on him, and he's starting a new movement called neo-masculinity, which won't have room for any homosexuals who like butt sex.
Well, exactly, but that was a weird way of taking that discussion. Anyway, that's essentially the red pill, as it were, or the red pillars are, because you got to bear in mind, I made that video, that was about 3 years ago now, so things have progressed since then. But the red pill is a kind of overarching way of describing all of these things, in essence. And it comes from the Matrix, by the way, which is
it's a Matrix.
Loads and loads and loads of different groups use it for different reasons.
Yeah.
Obviously it comes from the Matrix, taking the red pill to learn this new truth that no one else understands.
Which is odd, considering they all believe completely different and contradictory things, but they all think they know the truth. Maybe they're all wrong.
Like the Nazis use it too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
actually, another thing we haven't mentioned is the black pillars as well, which is it can be used in two different ways. There's either that can refer to the nihilism of knowing about, female nature and all of this stuff, but it can also have the racial connotation of black pilling someone. Basically, when you've proven to someone and they then accept the inevitability of the coming race war.
Oh my gosh.
So that's another thing as well. Yeah, and like I say, this isn't just like an amorphous blob on the internet. There's a funnel from one end, from the lesser extreme end, to these people who are genuinely calling for race war. People like Chris Cantwell, who, like I say, was being interviewed very softball by Karen Strachan, who's being very softball interviewed by Dave Rubin. There's a funnel.
Yeah,
of less extreme to more and more and more extreme.
So Chris Cantwell is the guy who was in that Vice documentary about Charlottesville, right? Who got kicked off of OkCupid, I believe, the dating service.
Yes,
he was indeed. Yeah.
So there's a prominent atheist podcast who did a half-hour rant about how unfair it is. Maybe it's 20-something minutes. I don't know. Some Twitter pedant is going to come and complain to me that I didn't get the time right. So
yeah, it's 26 minutes and 14 seconds.
Yeah. So therefore, your whole point is invalid. But yeah, so he did a rant about how unfair and how it's leftist groupthink that Chris Cantwell was not allowed to remain on the dating site. This man who was talking about violence in this big documentary after a murder has happened, and he said, be prepared for more violence. Why would any company want to subject their pool of daters to this man? It makes perfect sense that he was removed. But no. This prominent free speech, definitely not right-wing atheist, was so offended that leftists couldn't even I don't want to say his name, but
what does it rhyme with? What was his name rhyme with?
But anyway, so he was really upset that a guy should have a right to be an asshole and date. It's just
but if you're going to be violent, I mean, did you see the amount of guns he took to Charlottesville?
I don't understand.
He's clearly a dangerous person. Why would you, like you say, why would you want to expose these unwitting, unknowing people to this fucking monster?
Well, the problem is he's probably legitimately putting people in danger by simply being around them. So it would make sense not to allow him around.
Right. Never mind bad for business, right? They're going to do what's best for their business. I just don't understand what level of hatred you must have to have for the left, that even in this, it's not the Nazis' fault. It's the leftist groupthink. I don't know what's happening here. The priorities are so out of whack that...
Well, it's just utter tribalism. There's nothing more or less about it.
But what are they tribal about? Who are they're tribal with the Nazi? That's their tribe? No.
Well, essentially, yeah, as David mentioned earlier, it's the uniting of the whole right.
But they don't even admit to being right-wingers. They claim they are leftists repeatedly.
Well, exactly. Well, Sargon McCad claims to be a leftist and then spews all right bullshit. It's a constant tactic. Dave Rubin does the same. Oh, I was of the left. I'm a liberal. I'm a classical liberal. No, you're
the last liberal. Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, shut the fuck up, Rubin, you prick. Anyway, the far right have anchored themselves to the more moderate, kind of conservative type people, and now they see themselves as just a kind of a much larger bloc who are just anti-SJW. They're just anti-left. They define themselves in these ways, and by parroting much of the same line, they make weird alliances with people who really shouldn't be Nazis.
Yeah.
They don't stand for those kind of Nazi principles, but they're essentially helping the Nazis organise for their ethno-state.
Useful idiots.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's a quote worth remembering. When Richard Spencer described these people as good entry points to the alt-right, and they are. It's a funnel. They're channeling people that way.
I entirely agree.
Yeah. So there's also another component, there's the racism, there's the misogyny that are always tied in together, but then there's also this weird, fat-shaming theme that kept coming up. So when Heather Hare was killed after Charlottesville, Daily Stormer published an article titled, Heather Hare, a woman killed in road rage incident, was a fat, childless 32-year-old slut. And Sargon parroted that line that she didn't die of being hit by the car. She died of a heart attack, I think, because she's fat or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was in a hangout with Millennial Woes, the Scottish Nazi we referred to earlier. Yeah. He parroted the exact lie.
The funny thing was that Sargon was so defensive of Millennial Woes that he was adamant that Woes would he would actually change his position on the Heather Hare myth if he was presented with the evidence. But Woes commented in the comment section, so he clearly had seen the video, and there wasn't any clarification. There wasn't any any.
I know for a fact that, there isn't true that he would change his position, because I linked both Sargon and Millennial Woes to the official coroner's report, which was blunt force trauma to the chest. She was killed by the car.
Yeah.
I can't believe this is even a debate. Like,
yeah.
It's such a disgusting.
Well, this is the problem: is that these internet edgelords think they know better than the experts.
Well, you see these people who clearly haven't done any research, and they'll just say, "Oh, well, this bit of research is this is just they're leftist."
Yeah, and they have so much influence.
An academic who spent their entire life studying the thing. Like I was recently involved in a kind of weird Holocaust denial bit of drama on the internet, and I kept on having to say to these people, the 6 million figure for the number of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust wasn't just plucked out of the air. They act as if, because you can't give a specific number, that therefore, well, any number, you can say 4 million or 3 million or 2 million or whatever, but that doesn't just come out of the clear blue sky. You on the internet, some prick, plucking numbers out of the air is not the same as someone who spent their entire life studying this and come to a considered position of roughly, let's say, 5.7 million or something. That's worth considering. You saying, well, you can't give me a specific number, therefore anything goes, is absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're looking for ways to deny, right? And then they claim that they are not hateful. They claim they're not Holocaust deniers. They claim that they are not Nazis. They claim they're, on the more moderate level, they claim they're not right-wingers.
Well, brilliantly, they claim they're not Nazis, but yet they use the number 1488 as their thing. The 88 is HH for Heil Hitler. That's literally what that is. You can't. I mean, to deny you're being a Nazi when you're literally hailing Hitler, fuck off.
Right.
That's just
There's one alt writer who does that, Braving Ruin. His original username was Mobius288. So, given that this is also a guy who said he found Mein Kampf inspiring and sympathized with the Nazis and admired some aspects of Hitler.
The thing is, I obviously,
but he's not a Nazi.
Being inspired by Mein Kampf is disgusting on any number of levels, but especially in terms of the literature, because that is a terrible book. That is a really boring, poorly written load of old shit. Even if you're going to be a Nazi, at least read well-written Nazi literature. Jesus Christ. Some people.
Is there any?
Well, maybe, David, that's how we can make our millions. We found a corner of the market we can fucking.
You can do the Nazi book club.
Do write Nazi literature well.
Sorry, for a second there, I apologise, Aina, but I misheard what you said. I thought you said Nazi butt plug for a second. And I had to think through it and think. No, she definitely didn't say Nazi butt plug.
No.
I wish you had, because that would have been hilarious. But Nazi book club works too.
Nazi book club, that can be your grift, right? Like,
but the problem is, I've never understood quite how that would work, because most Nazis I read can't read past a 10-year-old's level. Most of them.
You can invite Faith Goldie to your Nazi book club, because she has been openly admiring some fascist genocidal books, and if you point that out on Twitter, people will come in droves to say that doesn't mean that she agrees with the book.
This is a similar thing I got quite a while ago, because I pointed out someone had, while they were pretending to be a sort of classical liberal anti-social justice type in our community,
classical liberal,
at the same time he had been liking extremely anti-Semitic videos on his YouTube channel, and one of them was a 10-hour reading of the Turner Diaries, which is it follows this dystopian fiction of the white nationalist's worst nightmare of black people running around stealing people's guns, and it follows this white nationalist terrorist group that goes from murdering random black people to literally committing a genocide, and this is supported by the book. These are presented as the heroes, and the response. This is honestly the response I got from one of the defenders on Twitter was maybe he just thought it was well written.
It was just the story arc. You really enjoyed some of the through lines and the subplots. It was really well written. The characters were really fleshed out nicely. No, it's fucking Nazi genocide porn, you fucking idiot.
I mean, that's not even true. I've read, I've listened to that 10-hour recording of the Turner Diaries. It's a badly written book. It's horribly written.
I'm telling you, Dave, that's a corner of the market. We can do it. We can write really well first fucking... We can become the Shakespeares of Nazism. Let's do it.
You'll raise £100,000 very quickly, especially if someone tries to silence you.
Exactly, yeah.
That can be arranged. You can arrange for someone to silence you and then start a GoFundMe.
My friend Michael Rowlands has a fantastic bit of shtick that he always does with Dave Rubin on Twitter. Whenever someone posts something mean under his comment, he screenshots it and then sends it to Dave Rubin with, "Have me on your show, they're trying to silence me." And he does it about 20 times a day. It's a lot of fun.
He hasn't been blocked yet?
Well, if Dave Rubin ever actually notices, I'm sure he will block him because, he's not remotely interested in actual discourse at all.
At all.
As we can see, actually, did you see to change the subject, I suppose, Dave Rubin's thing at the University of New Hampshire a couple of days ago?
I did not.
Was his stand-up?
Well, no, he was supposed to be he was invited by Turning Point USA, which shows you how liberal he is.
Those people that wore literal diapers to own the libs.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Yeah, the Charlie Kirk, the living meme, is the leader of this group. They are the ultimate lolcows. They're ridiculous. He was invited by them to speak at the University of New Hampshire, obviously in America. And there was some, as there usually is, there was some protests and kerfuffles and stuff. But there was also, he tried to shut down anyone who would speak at the actual microphone that was against him.
I've heard him doing this before. This guy also posted on Reddit that he was silenced by Dave, because he was removed. I think his question was removed from the video clip that was posted on the internet after a while because he thoroughly owned Dave in some way. So Dave removed it from the video.
I mean, it's entirely believable.
Yeah, he's not actually. He's not as is the case with all of them. When it comes down to it, they're not actually interested in having a discourse. These people want to just preach for the most part. I'm not saying again # not all, because some of them do actually want to do debate. One thing I will give to Sargon is that he took on the Mook guy. And he was shut down, but they still did the debate outside. He actually wanted to talk with someone with a different opinion and have a back and forth. That's fine. I've got no problem with that. But most of the time, most of them just want to preach, but mostly preach to the converted as well. They're not even going to try and talk to the left and say, well, maybe can you see it from this other perspective? They just want to say, well, fuck you to these people. You're aggressives. You're SJWs. We're all fantastic.
Yeah, but to steer the conversation back to the incel manosphere stuff, as I was talking about the fat shaming theme, another thing that I came across from your Roosh V video is that Roosh V weirdly did an appearance on Dr. Oz's show, and that's where he was called out for being leading the international fat shaming campaign. He was
self-appointed, Roosh V, as the leader of the international fat shaming movement. Now that takes a special level of A, narcissism, and B, utter patheticness. And not just that, but he made Dr. Oz look like a proper scientist chap, because he actually brought out studies and said, look, fat shaming doesn't work. Even if we believe you and say that you're doing this for the interest because you're interested in the health of these people, which they're not. That's just the line they use to try and justify it. But even if that's the case, these studies say, look, fat shaming doesn't work as a tactic to get people to lose weight or to live more healthily. It doesn't work. So he actually made Dr. Oz look like not a hack.
Right, which was so shocking. Yeah, I'm like, Dr. Oz is sounding sensible. What? Wow. It was bizarre to see that. And the way that he talks about it, he's worried, every year straight men like me would have less options to date a thin, beautiful girl. They're getting bigger and bigger. It's like he views them
about dating. He's not interested in dating either. That's to bring it back to the point. He's not. He's got absolutely no concept of how healthy human relationships are supposed to work. Even not even just non-romantic ones as well. He's not interested in dating.
The way they view women.
This is another problem with that's even arguably wider about that relates to incels and a lot of this stuff, is that within these circles they don't have they don't have like healthy interactions with each other, because a lot of their interaction is anonymized. They sort of demonize just normal people.
Yeah, well, exactly this concept of the normie. It's when it's done ironically. Okay, it's just a kind of in-group, out-group nonsense, right?
Yeah, I sometimes use the term normie to refer to just like people who don't understand this internet stuff. It's not a negative fine. Connotation.
Well, exactly, yeah. Like I say, when it's used in that kind of, well, it doesn't even have to be ironic. You can use it in a serious way, like you say, to differentiate between an in and out group.
Right, and even like, you know, in my uni days, I was pretty heavily involved in the goth scene that was used for people that were like, you know, non-goth. So, oh, look, the normies.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But there was no like hatred or desire for violence, or
you can tell in Minisian's thing when he mentions Chads and Stacys, it's a similar thing where they've basically made normal people into the enemy, which is really bad, because you can see that whenever any of these online Manospherian groups, when they actually interact with normal society, you can kind of get the feeling that they don't quite know how to handle the scenario. They're not all like crazy fuckers who are going to go and, you know, ram a van into a group of pedestrians. Whatever.
But you never know who is going to act out that way, right?
Well, some things... They're all... Virtually every incel I've ever met has those kind of violent fantasies.
You've met incels?
Well, met in the online sense. I've never, in the same way I've met you here today.
Right. Okay.
When I've interacted with incels. Although I suppose I probably have met some incels, but just anonymously. So anyway, interacted with them online. They have these kind of violent fantasies and weird conspiracies about the world. And so trying to pick out the needle from the haystack of which one is going to do something like this, who's going to be the next Rogers, the next Minisian, is really tricky. And I don't know how you do it, but we do need to, because that swamp, to mix my metaphors now, that swamp isn't going to go anywhere, and more monsters are going to arise from it.
Yeah, I mean, the ideology as a whole needs to be recognized as something very, very toxic. And I think, you know, David is a good person to speak to that from experience. David, I read an article about you where you were quoted as, you know, saying that going out and dating is too risky. Girls could falsely accuse you of rape.
Yeah, I have to I have to say that wasn't, like, what the quotes in a lot of those articles aren't actually all me, because the first article written was not just interviewing me, it was also interviewing a couple of other MGTOWs, some of whom were a little bit more radical than me. And I think some of that got mixed in. And then in the second article, which was allegedly about me, the journalist actually took a lot of what I said out of context to try and make me look worse. And I was trying to explain to him that there were a lot of like crazier MGTOWs out there. And I was at this point already considering just running in the opposite direction, because the nutcases came out of the woodworks. So so he tried to make me out to be one of the crazies that I was just sort of like saying, okay, these kinds of people exist, I don't like them.
Well, what I will also say in David's defence, although it is funny to look back and occasionally mock David for his silliness in the past, is that he was a young, I mean, this was like even pre-university days, wasn't it? Like he was a child, basically.
I just turned 18 like a few months before, and I'd just come to uni. So when if you come across any articles like that or any videos of him back in the day, give him a bit of slack, because he was a stupid young child or a stupid young man, and we've all been there. I've grown up quite a bit in the last couple of years. Well, I have to say, without wanting to kiss your ass too much, it has been actually quite impressive and fascinating to see your growth as a human being in the last 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Aw, I love you too.
Just remember, our first interaction wasn't quite so cordial, if you recall.
That's true. Yeah, it wasn't.
I think I made the video and titled it something like welcome introducing my pet gimp or something stupid. Yeah.
Well, David, you and I also haven't always got along online, right? But I do appreciate the fact that you have left this ideology behind and you're taking some time to grow. And I think from what I've seen, you've been pretty embraced by lefty Twitter, even when you still had MRA in your profile, which was sort of confusing for me. But, you know, it was good to get to know you online and see how you're sort of opposing these things now and speaking out as an ex-person from that scene.
Yeah, and I think I have, and I think like coming from inside that scene, I sort of understand where they're coming from a bit better, and that, and I think that helps to give some insight on why they think what they do, and maybe best on how to convince them out of it.
Yeah. So you did, though, say in those articles that you did not want a girlfriend, or you did, that was not you who said
that
it?
Wasn't me. No,
that wasn't you.
It went from I didn't want to get married to I was sort of uncomfortable with the with casual sex at uni, to I didn't want to go out with women at all, to I didn't even talk to women, and just like. The date of the article corresponded to how extreme it got, because tabloids, they don't like, most of them didn't even interview me. They regurgitated the last one had written and then made it even crazier.
Wow.
The Sun like a game of Chinese whispers, but with newspapers, and it just gets worse and worse, to the point where David Surratt, 18-year-old Hitler lover, you know.
Yeah.
No, I think I think one of them did refer to me as I was on a campaign against women.
How about the fact that you shifted flats or something because you found out your roommates were feminists? Is that true?
No, that wasn't the reason.
Didn't they attack you in your own house? Basically,
they didn't. They didn't attack me. They found some they found my videos where I'd said some like anti-feminist stuff. And they invited a bunch of other friends round, and then all sat in the lounge area. Invited me into the room and like basically did this intervention on me, and then shouted at me for like an hour straight. So like you can imagine me like I'd been watching Sargon videos for a year. Universities are Marxist like dystopian.
Oh no!
Like they're like out to that everyone's out to get you at a university, and then that happens to me in like the first 2 months. I love the idea. Terrifying.
I love the idea of an anti-feminist intervention just coming in. David, no, your misogyny is getting too much. It's hurting you and the people around you.
So, did that make you sort of dig your heels into the MRA scene more? That experience,
it definitely did. I ended up sort of retaking the MGTOW label and doing the interviews actually quite shortly after that. So, and I was still sort of in paranoid mode at the point.
Yeah, that probably speaks to, and I think it probably comes from like a good place in a lot of cases, but unfortunately it's counterproductive. The heavy-handedness of certain feminist tactics is really not helpful when you've got like this. When you get attacked, and when I say attack, obviously they didn't physically attack you, but when you get kind of personally attacked in that way, you're going to get defensive, and the more you push, the more defensive they're going to get, and you get into a kind of loop of sort of unintentionally radicalizing people who might otherwise have been more, you know, amiable to your viewpoints or your discussion or whatever.
But on the positive side, once David started, I think, removing himself from that, he completely was welcomed by a bunch of lefties that I've seen.
There's a few of them who are still who still have me blocked for absolutely no reason, but
well, people might not have followed your journey, and also, I mean, I think you still have a lot of these alt-right type people that follow your Twitter, right? Because every time you've retweeted me, I've had some really awful fashy people in my comments.
Oh yeah,
or as David calls them, friends. Oh.
No, I have a lot of hate followers, I have to admit.
So when I did that thing with Richard Spencer, I picked up a lot of those people as well. So you might get the occasional one from me as well. But yeah, they're there. That's the thing. You can't really control who follows you so much.
Yeah. I mean, I have to, well, you can turn them off for sure. Like I keep pissing conservatives off all the time, and some do hate follow me for sure, but they don't use me in the way that some very right-leaning ex-Muslims are used as a shield for their horrible ideas.
Oh.
Yeah, there's way more extreme than that out there.
Yeah, but she just annoys me because she's really high profile about it.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah. But yeah, so David, you never were of the girls are icky kind of cooties, like I don't ever want to sleep with women kind of MGTOW. I'm just trying to understand.
Oh, no, by no means. I was like my entire thing with during that entire thing with MGTOW, like the furthest I ever went was I'm not entirely sure about like casual sex, because I legitimately want a long-term relationship, and there's with sex there's quite a lot of trust involved, and I'm just not sure about doing that with a stranger. That was as far as I ever went. Okay,
because the stuff I read online in these MGTOW forums was pretty shocking to me, so I guess you were definitely one of the more moderate.
I got some of the craziest messages after that. Stuff like, oh, MGTOW's a MGTOW. I know you've been saying this stuff about how women aren't evil, but like you do really realize that women are evil, right? I was just like, I got so many of these messages. I ended up in just constant fights with MGTOWs.
So did that turn you off as well?
That turned me off of the MGTOW community. Was being embraced by them and realizing how absolutely insane they were. And then I ended up picking a fight with pretty much every single MGTOW, like prominent MGTOW YouTube commenter.
If we were to send this back in time, I don't know, 15 years, and you just said that prominent MGTOW YouTuber, like, I don't know if people would know what the hell we're talking about, right? Like, it's like...
No, they wouldn't.
You can end up having conversations like that on the internet, which if you went back a year, it wouldn't make sense. Like, when you talk about groipers and things like that.
Yeah,
that wouldn't have made any sense.
Yeah, the groipers are the Nazbold Discords baited the groipers into spurging out at the Tradthots, and the old bugmen are cucking for them.
Right, that barely made sense to me, so I don't know.
It barely makes sense to people who are like plugged into this stuff, and I hate that I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, I love it when you get these politicians who talk about the internet as if they have any understanding of any of it.
Yeah, it's funny.
People who clearly like they use their Twitter account once a year or something. That's about as close as they get to it, and they've got to make laws to fucking actually control this stuff. It's ridiculous.
Well, even some journalists are pretty clueless. Some like mainstream journalists will write about Nazis for, say, the New York Times. Their coverage will be terrible. Ignorant.
That's true. Although there are quite a few decent journalists out there.
There's definitely some that are plugged in.
And they're quite plugged into this stuff, and I'm very optimistic about the future of that.
But so the different shades, right? So MGTOWs, what I used to see was like women are disgusting, women are evil. The weirdest one, like I had no conception that there are like straight men out there that think like this. There was one post from Reddit that I saw was like, vaginas are like disgusting moist bacteria holes, and why would you want to even stick your penis in that?
Yeah, I've heard women described as the vagina being essentially a disease hole that men should never go down, and all that. Yeah, that's quite a common MGTOW sort of talking point in many ways.
Because I started I did like watch some MGTOW content like a couple years before that, and it seems that the community entirely radicalized within that time. Because it started out as just this sort of like breakaway from the men's rights movement, where they were sort of like, I just don't want to get married. The divorce courts and stuff like that, it's a bit too extreme, so we're going to start this men going their own way, and we're just not going to get married on top of the men's rights stuff. But then they just went insane.
Yeah. And then the incel stuff, like, let me just quote some stuff from this Village Voice article. She saw on incel.me, she writes, there was things like female genocide now. Just the thought of women losing their privileges is delightful. Whenever a fucking whore is referred to as a sex worker, it really puts me in the mood to commit genocide. They need to be locked up in basements for rape and reproduction purposes. And then a deleted post over the weekend called for a female CBC journalist to be shot. The poster used Alec Minassian's face as his avatar and listed the address of CBC headquarters. This is now a few steps above that vaginas are bacteria hole stuff. This is now calling for genocide and murder. And I don't think people realize how much hate there is in these people.
Yeah, and I think like the problem is that to an extent they egg each other on, because this is the thing with the internet, is you can find a bunch of people with the exact same problems as you, but that ends up not helping because they're also a bunch of people who have failed to address the exact same problems as you. So you all just end up in this very unproductive circle jerk. And it just radicalizes further. Mm-hmm.
So what do you recommend is a good path for reaching these types of young men? I mean, I heard people say that Jordan Peterson is providing an alternate path for men, and I think that is so misguided. I think he's providing a path for this kind of shit to mainstreamize and seem more respectable. I don't think he...
I'm unconvinced that he's actually straightening these people out in any sense. From what I can tell, the kinds of people he's pulling in are people who don't really need him anyway. Yeah. It's like the kinds of people who would need that sort of self-help stuff are the kinds of people that won't read or come across Peterson. That's
exactly. Yeah, they won't read him, and they won't be attracted to his thing because of the traditionalism of his religiosity. They're not going to. That's not going to chime well with them at all. I mean, these are people who can't even get laid, let alone think about marriage or raising kids or anything like that. So he's just not going to be a fundamentally attractive proposition to the very people who might need that kind of self-improvement.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it's hard to really say how you would de-radicalize these people. When you're talking about these very small fringe communities, I don't think it's really going to be something that you can do in the online space. It's something that like if you met a person like this in person, you would have to help them from that perspective.
Yeah, well, it comes back, I think, to a point I made earlier or touched upon earlier, is we need vastly more money to be spent and energy to be put into mental health, and for men and women. Mm-hmm. But it would, in the case of young men, it's when family members notice these things, like if people get sucked into the kind of defooing bullshit cult of Stefan Molyneux, or
can you explain what defooing is?
Oh, so defooing is a foo is family of origin, mm-hmm. and his concept of defooing is to escape. In theory, it's to escape like abusive relationships and stuff, but actually what it is hiving you off from your support network in the traditional cultish way.
Yeah, very cultish.
Do that. And to become a kind of Stefan Molyneux cultist and to buy into his whole shtick and essentially give him money. That's how a lot of what he does, or did. He's moved more into a kind of alt-right space now, but that's certainly the way he goes.
I did like your description of Stefan Molyneux, which was the leader of the world's shittest cult.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he really is, because at least the normal cult will say, like, oh, we're going to give you eternal life on planet Xenu. Like, okay, if I'm going to believe some shit, that sounds all right. But his is just, you're going to be lonely. That's literally all he's offering you is loneliness and a lack of support network. Oh, thanks, Steph. Yeah, but people buy it because he's, I don't know, charismatic to a certain number of people or whatever. Mm-hmm. But back to the point about mental health is when family members notice that change begin to happen, they don't actually have anywhere to go with that, especially in places like America where your healthcare isn't even public at all. So you've got no option for them to go to if you're not a very rich family, which obviously not many are. You have potential sort of stopping points turning points for these people potentially, that even if people wanted to take them, the option to actually take them isn't there. And that's really dangerous, because I'm sure at some point, if Manosphere had been grabbed, or if Rogers had been grabbed earlier and taken to actual proper mental health care and potentially medication if necessary, or even institutionalization in some cases, these things can be stopped. You're never going to stop all of them, but you can certainly make a big fucking dent in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think mental health is something that's often neglected, but there's got to be something else that can be like, I don't know, red flags for online behavior that people can notice and pay attention to.
Well, I think in terms of, say, policing as well and anti-terrorism work, because I think you have to start thinking about these things in terms of it being terrorist, because when you have mass shootings and people driving vans into pedestrians and these these sort of echo chambers, these self-inflating, these self-extremizing or whatever communities online, it's no different than a jihadist cult, other than the fact that they don't necessarily believe in a single god or whatever. But it has the same impact. It has the same sort of process and all the rest of it.
It murders people.
And,
that's
well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
People killed.
The end of it is exactly the same. Yeah.
Right.
And so you have to start thinking about it in that sense, in the same way that the police try and monitor jihadist networks or like other sort of nationalist, separatist movements or whatever. You need to start the police and the secret, intelligence people and all the rest of it have to actually start looking into these groups. And like you say, there needs to be a system of red flags in place whereby you can start spotting who is going down that much more extreme route and who looks like they could be worth keeping an eye on, let's say.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing is that the kinds of people who act as gateway drugs or what was the other what was the thing Richard Spencer said about Sargon and Southern?
Entry points.
Entry points, yeah. The gateway drugs and entry points. I think it's very much worth, like, one of the things you probably could do online, like if you're listening to this right now and you want to potentially have an effect, is to find those kinds of people who are acting as entry points, who are acting as sort of the kinds of people who end up leading people in this direction, and calling them out for it. Yeah,
it's not easy, but you should do it. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is with a lot of these extremist movements, especially when you get into sort of far right stuff, it's very identity based and it's very authoritarian. So they center around leaders. They center. They very often center around leaders and figureheads. So taking those out, or at least antagonizing them, it effectively does help to sort of lessen the effect, to stem the bleeding, if you may. That's the only thing I can really think of that might in some way be productive.
I mean, it's intimidating also to call out these big figures, because you often get dogpiled.
Oh, yeah.
And their followers are like cultists, right? You can't criticize their favorite leaders at all.
Yeah, that's true.
So proceed with caution on that, but
an almost deification or some beatification from some of these people towards their stars. Jordan Peterson is the most extreme example I've seen so far of that, where literally any mild criticism of him is like, oh no, you've taken him out of context.
Quoting his own words is taking him out of context.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
It's
bizarre. And most people underestimate how dangerous he is, I think. But yeah, before we wrap up, Kevin, I never got to ask you how you got into this. How did you get so deeply involved, and why?
Well, it comes from the fact that the thing that David mentioned earlier, the kind of schism, if you will, of online atheism, where I'd have never even bothered starting making YouTube videos if it weren't for the fact that the people I'd watched for a long time and seen them, make very good takedowns of religious fundamentalists and woo peddlers and all this sort of stuff, if they hadn't lurched hideously to the right, I'd have just never bothered, because it wouldn't have been a problem for me. Yep. It was only when I saw that community, and I made a prediction that they would end up allying with the very people they'd once opposed. And with Jordan Peterson, you've seen that in its full fruition. And this is just my attempt to essentially fight back against it, And so whether it be the misogyny inherent with the anti-feminism, or with, the kind of hideous xenophobia and Islamophobia toward any number of different nationalities and religious groups, the move to the alt-right, that has to be opposed. Because if there's no... I don't think that the atheist community is inherently worth anything in of itself, other than the fact that it was an entertaining space where science and reason and actual rationality were a thing that was of worth and of value. And now that's metastasized into this just grotesque monster.
And we got to remember that this is having an effect in the real world. That the YouTubers that we, the YouTubers and figures that we do interact with and talk about are having significant real world effects.
They've all had their own little flirtations with Alex Jones, and the man who is now the president of the United States was interviewed on Alex Jones's channel and said, "I think you'll be happy with my work."
Yeah.
That's not an insignificant piece of internet nonsense anymore. That's a really dangerous thing. Yeah.
It just shocks me to know that both of you came into this Manosphere stuff from the atheist... from opposite sides, absolutely, but from the atheist anti-feminist thing. And I've been saying for ages that the atheist scene is a weird, microcosm of a bunch of different sorts of bigotries that makes us within the skeptosphere aware of this stuff a lot faster than the mainstream.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But it's so odd to me that the internet atheist scene has gone this way, because of the atheists I've met in real life, they've all been really nice people.
And progressive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But online, they're awful. I mean, they really are. If someone asked me for recommendations as towards atheism and stuff, the last place I would send them would be YouTube atheism. Oh, yeah. Because I can't think of a better way of sending them toward religion than that. Yeah. They're awful.
But YouTube atheism has sort of bled into other online atheism. It's not just YouTube atheism that's toxic anymore. There's other atheist podcasters that defend Sargon. Majid Nawaz, for fuck's sake, went on Sargon's show to promote his terrible hypocritical lawsuit against the SPLC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and you've seen it with all these fucking reactionary dickheads as well. And the mythicist Milwaukee becoming shitlord Khan, and Sam Harris having fucking the bell jar on his show.
The bell curve guy,
there's all sorts of, like I say, bleeding out from. It's not just the YouTube atheism scene or anything. Yeah, this has infected the real world atheism.
Yeah, right. This is I don't even think there really is a YouTube atheism scene anymore. It's just a reactionary scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while I was watching your Manosphere videos, the older ones, I noticed, that you made some jokes involving rape, and I remember asking you about this online earlier. So, do you think your thoughts around using rape as a joke have evolved?
Oh, yeah, enormously, actually. Like I said, there were especially one right at the end of the very first episode, the Rouge Fee episode, where I said, I hope he gets raped. Now,
I was very uncomfortable with that,
Yeah. I would never say that now. I'm not going to take that video down. I'm not going to deny that it happened. I'm not one of those people.
Yep.
So it's there in perpetuity. I'm not comfortable with it. So
I've actually taken the opposite tactic to that, is that stuff I don't think represents me anymore, I have taken down. Mm-hmm. So because I don't want people to get an image of me that just doesn't represent me anymore. But at the same time, if what I was saying was misleading and led was me from a position where I don't think I was entirely I don't think I was entirely in the right place, then I don't to an extent I think it's kind of like taking down a post that I think is false if I did it 5 minutes ago. If I fact checked something and it actually wasn't true, I don't care if I posted it a year ago or 5 minutes ago.
Okay,
it's the same
but
thing.
One thing I would say,
I don't have any issue with your way, Kev. I was just saying.
No, absolutely. I'm not going to attack or get defensive at all. There, I would just say that I think there's a difference between something that's factually wrong and something that I said in a way that was something that I said in a moment of sort of anger or haste or something that I later thought, well, I wish I hadn't said that. I'm not going to deny that I said it. If that makes sense. I'm not going to erase that from history. But my thinking has evolved. But it's evolved in two main ways. Firstly, I would never have said that now. And I went through a phase where I didn't think that you could ever really even mention it in any kind of jocular way. Sort of orthodox feminist approach or whatever. But it was upon listening to different people who had been victims of rape and sexual assault, for whom rape, hearing jokes about rape and hearing rape mentioned in a humorous way, not in like taking the piss out of people who've been victims, but essentially punching up at the horrific people who do this and at the culture of it and stuff, demystified that experience for them and took away some of the harsh loneliness of it to hear other people talk about it in this way. And actually help them deal with their experiences. So actually, I've come to a far more nuanced view, which is something that I've gained more and more as I've grown up and evolved and grown as a person and the rest of it. That you find that you can't have these sort of catch-all things of, oh, you can't ever do this or you must always do this or whatever. Life is a really complicated and messy process, and different people need different ways of dealing with that. And so there are some people who do comedy about rape that I think are helpful to some victims, but for some people they just have to avoid all of that because they don't ever want to think about it again. And so I steer clear of it because I don't think I necessarily have the experience to tackle the issue in a comedic way anymore. But I'm not going to attack other people who do.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the thing that I find with a lot of humor that gets into edginess is the I see quite a lot of people on left Twitter. They'll fat shame Nazis, or they'll shame them for their appearance or stuff like that. And I think as far as I'm concerned, and I know this isn't rape. I think we should leave that out specifically. But it's more just general insults that would be considered not progressive. And I think to an extent it does somewhat if you're doing it from the perspective of this person is a hypocrite because they would use these jokes and it sort of takes away the power of those kinds of kinds of personal attacks. It's sort of like when you have an alt-righter who now has to say, well, yeah, okay, I'm mixed race, but what's wrong with that? That takes away a lot of they have to now start criticizing racism unintentionally, and I think to an extent it's worthwhile when you do stuff like that because it throws a wrench in the works of what the power that they get from shaming and a lot of the attitudes behind it.
Well, I have to say, when it comes to body shaming and stuff, I'm generally against it. But what I do, and I've done it in my series many times, and I will continue to do it, is if someone has gone out of their way to shame, then I feel like it's perfectly justified to throw it back at them.
Yeah. So there was a guy who talked about not sleeping with Indian women because they're hideous and ugly or something, but he's
Matt Forney.
He's not very attractive himself at all.
He looks like he's got this weirdly shaped skull.
Well, he looks like a weird version of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So
there you go. I think that I would absolutely never go into shaming someone's looks or something like that because it's something that they can't help unless their thing is to shame people for their looks.
Yeah, the perfect example from my series is War Corpse 666, who's now called the Lord of the Patriarchy because his channel got shut down and he restarted. So he's now called the Lord of the Patriarchy. He's a very strange individual. And I described him, and I think rather accurately, as looking like the runt of Jabba the Hutt's litter. He really is a very odd... He looks like a kind of weird walrus human hybrid. And yet he'll sit there and talk about women who are, almost objectively beautiful. and nitpick them about some small aspect of them and call women fat, ugly dykes. And just, I mean, he's a really awful, nasty bastard at times. And so I felt it absolutely necessary to rip the fuck into him, because I thought, actually, do you own a mirror? Do you know what you look like? I'm sorry. Like, it shouldn't come down to that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, if you're going to be that. And he's a really odd chap. The strangest piece of manosphere nonsense I've ever seen. He did a video where he was defending a company against a homophobic attack, in which he described all lesbians. Also, he said, it's not my fault that most lesbians are fat, hairy dykes that no man would want to fuck. Now, in a video where you're defending someone against a homophobic attack and you say that
you're
line,
a homophobe.
I mean, that is a level of stupidity I can't imagine.
You've just proven that.
How has he not ended up killing himself while trying to tie his shoelaces or something? It's just so dense. God almighty.
Have you heard the people that say not to kink shame Trump for, like, I don't know, piss play?
Nah, fuck him. He's made a living out of
exactly
out of Miss World and stuff, and of calling the same women that you're a 6 out of 10, or I bet you look good on your knees, and all this. He's just a nasty rapist piece of shit. So frankly, the fucking orange pish fetishist fucking dickhead with his tiny little cock, and there's no way he doesn't have an absolute pecker of a thing going on there. Right, I'm going to rip into him at every opportunity. Every opportunity.
And I think this is one of the things where, like you said, Kev, life is a bit more complicated and messy than like straight up hard principles are gonna work with, and sometimes you just got to pick your battles.
Yeah, it's difficult to have one-size-fits-all approaches to anything, because life is complicated and people are so different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, guys, thank you both so much for joining me and discussing this depressing topic and informing people about the different groups and all kinds of degrees of awfulness that exist in the manosphere. And hopefully we can find some way to figure out when people are going too far, because the internet causes so many different little groups to self-radicalize, and that just terrifies me.
Well, thank you for having us on, although I can't help but feel that because you had ContraPoints and H-Bomber Guy last time, that this is a very significant step down. You're slumming it today, let's be honest.
Hey, I don't rank my guests. I think everyone's interesting. Everyone that I invite on.
Well, you should, because frankly, you need to up your game. Because if you're only dragging in the likes of me and Sharat, you can do better.
Well, who else was I going to get for incel talk? Tell me who the stars are.
Yeah, let's face it. We're the only people who would come here.
Yeah, the only people sad enough to actually know what these incel things are. Although I'm glad I learned what roasty is, because that's enriched my life. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad I taught you guys something. Wow.
God.
All right, well, take care, guys.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/Nice Mangoes. No Ian Mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter @Nice Mangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal. nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no Ian Mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too. A special thanks to Dylan Beck for theme music, sound, and production help.